So, right. Hello, everyone. I think we're ready to start, no? Okay. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to the global launch of UNODC's flagship World Drug Report 2021. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my colleague, Ms. Angela Meh, Chief of the Research and Trend Analysis Branch, which published today's report. Ms. Meh will make a short presentation of the report's key findings, and then we will open up for questions. Right, Ms. Meh, please.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning to everyone and to all of you here and online. So, if we can have a presentation, I just have a few slides to show you also some of the visuals for the data and information that we have in this year report. I don't know if somebody's putting up the slide. Maybe not. Okay, well, meanwhile, while we wait for the slide, you will see some, we have this year, I would say maybe 3 topical messages out of the report, then 4 messages relating to the impact of COVID on drugs, and then we have a lot of other updates, if you want, on the single drug markets. One of the main analyses that we have done this year is to understand how young people perceive cannabis and compare it with actually the evolution of the cannabis product over the years. And so you see that in the last 24 years, there has been quite a sharp increase in the percentage of THC that is contained in cannabis, both in the United States and in Europe. To give you an example, in Europe it went from 7 to 11%, to 6, sorry, from 6 to 11%, and in the United States from 4 to 16. So it quadrupled the percentage of THC in cannabis in the United States. So clearly, cannabis in the market has become more potent. On the contrary, we see an opposite trend on how young people perceive cannabis. And so the long time series that we have again from the US and Europe on the percentage of adolescents that say how if they perceive cannabis as harmful when used regularly, you see that this has decreased by 40%, for example, in the US, and by 25% in Europe. So there is clearly a mismatch between the reality, so the potency of cannabis in the market, and the fact that young people actually perceive it, that less and less people perceive it as harmful. And so this is one of the analyses and finding that brings also from the UNODC side the need, shows particularly the need to avoid misinformation, to really the need to disseminate factual information about cannabis without stigmatizing drug users or cannabis users, but to make sure that there are scientific facts, and so that out there, particularly young people, can make decisions based on scientific and authoritative information. The other analysis that we have done, for the first time we have tried to quantify the sales of drugs over the darknet. And we have analyzed some of the major drug market on the darknet, and we saw that even if there is a lot of volatility, and if in the presentation I would have shown how volatile are the drug market on the darknet, because they easily come and they easily disappear. But overall, if we see, on average, we see that it has increased by 4 times, quadruple the annual sale of drugs in the darknet, and that has reached about 350 million in 2020. So clearly, still remain the darknet if we, a small proportion of sales made in general on drugs. It remains still a small proportion globally, but is really fast growing. The other analysis that we have done this year is to think about the future. And we thought, how does the drug situation will look in 2030? 2030 is the year where we hope to achieve all of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we took that as the target year to see also what we think about the size of drug markets. And so looking at the demographic changes and particularly looking at the increase in population but also the increase of the percentage of young people, particularly in developing countries, we estimated that by 2030 we will have about 11% more number of people that use drugs. And in Africa, this percentage will be 40%. So we expect that in 2030, if nothing is done to try to contain further the problem, we will have 40% more people who use drugs in Africa. So why is this important? Thank you. So just to show you here, I think what I wanted to show was the volatility of the market on the darknet, and you clearly see with the different colors and the up and downs how really the darknet change every day. Now here, in terms of what I was discussing, this increase, why is important? It's important because that 40% more drug users in Africa means more drugs produced, more drug trafficked, more need for treatment facilities. So in a continent where we already have serious gaps in terms of treatment facility, and also where, if we see globally, is probably where we have the weakest capacity also to fight the drug problem. And so this is, again, if you want an outlook to prepare and to think about in the future, so that in a way countries and international communities prepare to think what will come if nothing happens. Now, looking at the COVID, we have done a thorough analysis to understand how and if COVID has impacted the drug market. So in terms of use and the provision of services for drug users, it was clear, and you see here in the right, the graph in the right column, that according to experts, there was clearly a disruption in many of the services for drug users. But if you want, the good news is that actually this disruption and all the difficulties that came with the COVID actually triggered innovation. And so we have seen across the globe innovation in terms of making treatment medicines more available, even through extending prescription practices, even through vending machine, where those that need it, particularly people with drug use disorder, could really there and find the medication. So to overcome the closures also of health facilities for drug users. So, and then of course with technology, of course it was there before. So it's not that the COVID invented a new way of providing counseling, for example, but this clearly accelerated the COVID. And so the idea is that this is an encouraging trend, because it can eventually help to increase the accessibility of services. If the technology is used in a way that protect the privacy and respect all the scientific standards of treatment. Then looking at the supply side, so has the COVID and the disruption disrupted the way how drug traffickers operate? And clearly, I think overall, we have to say traffickers have demonstrated once again an incredible agility and on the way of adapting to the situation. So overall, drug markets have not drastically changed. But there are some dynamics that probably, have been accelerated, and some of the issues that changed during the pandemic. One, and you see on the right side here, is the change on modes of transportation. This is based on small seizures, but you can clearly see between 19 and 20 how for each drug, how this has changed. And so clearly traffickers try to find other ways, and particularly maritime ways, but also river ways to transport instead of land, where there were particularly strong closures and where there was increased control in borders. But also what we have seen emerging, again, amazingly across all the regions, is an increase on the size of a shipment. So we have seen seizures that have been bigger and bigger. And so clearly showing that the way how the traffickers have adapted is probably to, go to maybe what they think safer route and then, concentrate more trafficking shipment. And also, we have seen more and more this what we call contactless ways of delivering drugs. Again, this emerged even before, particularly, for example, with the darknet and the use of internet, etc., to access to supply drugs. And that clearly this has accelerated. Through mail, through couriers, that the pandemic has accelerated this, but probably is something that is likely to stay if this is proven to be less risky for both traffickers and those that use drugs. And so, in a way, even if the COVID has not drastically changed fundamentally drug markets, have accelerated or triggers some new dynamics. Then in terms of use, so again, what we have seen since the beginning of the pandemic, through expert perception, and also now more and more data are becoming available, even if we don't have, we are not in the position to do global estimate, but more and more all the information that is coming available points to the same direction. That basically some types of drugs increased use. There was an increased use in terms also of frequency, probably, and these were particularly cannabis and the non-medical use of benzodiazepines. You see it here in the graph in terms of the perception of experts and in terms of percentage of countries where this expert report increase and decrease. And we see it also, for example, in the global survey of drug users. So this is, I think, a clear trend. What we have seen is also a clear trend is that actually some other drugs were less used, and particularly the drugs that are traditionally used in party settings, for example, in social settings like MDMA, or like also some of the stimulants we have seen decrease, cocaine in some parts of the world, and also methamphetamine in some parts of the world. So then, again, thinking about, we really try to see, and we say, but beyond the today and what we see today on the COVID, there will be, has COVID triggered something that will have a lasting effect on the drug market? And what we have analyzed is particularly the impact of economic crisis. And we discuss the potential and the risk based on what we have seen in the past and based on the condition that we have analyzed for many years that affect both drug cultivation and production and drug use. We see the risk that there is more people that will be probably pushed into illicit activities because of the economic challenges that they are facing, particularly in some countries where this may have a major effect. We have seen, for example, even from the economic indicators, that Latin America has been one of the regions that has most hit by the crisis. And the same like a country like Afghanistan, where really you have a situation beyond drugs, also with increasing prices, etc. So there is this risk and vulnerability of people to get involved more in illicit cultivation and manufacturing of drugs. And the same thing for drug use. Last year we have analyzed the social economic condition and the risk factors of drug use and moving from drug use to dependence, so to drug use disorders. And clearly some of the social economic factors like employment, education, poverty have clearly an impact on drug use disorders. And so we have seen and we have seen during the pandemic how much more people have been pushed into poverty. We saw how many school children have been left out of school. And we have also seen how the COVID has made many people to lose their jobs. So clearly all of these factors are likely to impact. And also another factor that more and more is emerging is the increase on mental health conditions, so more people exposed to mental health disorders. And again, knowing the relationship, the close relationship between mental health disorders and drug use disorders. So clearly also this will have an impact. To finish, maybe. Yes. So to finish, I just wanted to show you this map. Is just to make a point that the report analyzes all of the different dynamics that we have in different regions more in details and present all the latest trend. But here to make also the point that beyond cannabis, cannabis is remains the drugs that is most used in the world, that is most seized in the world, and so that affect basically all the countries in the world. But beyond cannabis, there are some, each sub-region has really its own drug challenges. And you see here, I don't go into the details, but the different colors basically are meant to show that this diversity. And so the different dynamics that affect, and if you want, the different threats that the different sub-regions are experiencing in terms of drugs. This, back to you, Brian.
Thank you. Some sobering statistics there, Angela. No, thank you very much. Okay, everyone, next we will move to the Q&A, where you can delve deeper into the facts that Angela presented. Please identify yourself and your news organization before asking the question. I will alternate between correspondents in the room and if there are any questions online. And I'm aware, Angela, that you have some interviews lined up as well afterwards. So thank you. Over to you. Questions? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Albert Otti with, Albert Otti with DPA, German Press Agency. About the possible long-term effects of COVID-19, what makes you think that the effects will be long-term and that people didn't just take to cannabis and other non-medical use of medications because they were locked into their apartments and had nothing else to do? And related to that, after the 2008-2009 crisis, because that's the crisis that I think you're comparing it to, how long was the effect? How big and how long was the effect? Thanks.
Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry. I thought you was waiting for Albert. Okay, so the long-term effect that we have presented and analyzed is not much relating on what happened during the pandemic, because as you say, this increase in cannabis or no medical use of pharmaceuticals was very much, and we analyze the reasons why people report to have increased or decreased drugs. Where we project an increase is more in relation to, if you want, the macroeconomic and macro social and economic situation that we see projecting in the future. And so it's more the fact of having had almost 2 years of young people not in school, and in some regions they're still experiencing lockdown. And we're starting, for example, having anecdotal information. Some countries, like in Latin America, where children that were out of school, they were recruited by groups to get into either drug cultivation or production, etc. So the issue that we have seen and is well researched that more than drug use is drug use disorders. So when it's not just the drug use but it's the regular use, and when you get to dependence, particularly, that this is really determined by a number of risk factors. And so that are well known. And these risk factors are a combination of, if you want, genetics, family, school, communities, and national circumstances. And what we are linking now this outlook perspective is more into this analysis and this what we call, if you want, a vicious cycle. And so what we see is when you will have more people experiencing poverty, when you will have more people that lose their job, these are definitely risk factors for drug use disorders. Yes.
Thank you. Turkish News Agency Anadolu. Speak to Ashkan. I have two questions. First of all, we have for 2019 global opium production. How much? How many? And the second question about the cannabis using in 2019, 200 million. We can see that. How many people use it in 2018? We have information if we can compare. Okay, thank you.
Yes. So in terms of opium production, we had an increase in the cultivation of opium and globally. And while in terms of tons of opium produced is about 7,000 opium, and the production has been rather stable. A small decrease in this year, in 2020, and this trend is largely due to the trends in Afghanistan that remains the largest producer in 2020, 85% of the production of opium. Yes. And then in terms of cannabis, there has been, is rather stable, the number of global drug users. But in general, we see, every year we have very few countries that have new data on drug users. And so the change that we see in the global numbers are just change that are not sensitive to real change. So I would say the overall is stable. Where we see in the long term, both in terms of cannabis and drug use in general, is an increase of 22% in the number of drug users. That is very much linked to the number of cannabis users, because cannabis is the drug that is most used. And of this 22%, about 10% is due to the increase in global population, but the rest is a real increase in terms of prevalence.
Next question, yes, gentleman in the front.
My name is Sharif. I am representing the Horn of Africa News Agency as well as the UNCAF, United Nations Correspondent Association. So my question goes to Africa, and I would, in your report you mentioned the school leavers, but in Africa there is the school street, how you call it, the streets children, and they used to have to use hashish, but if they don't find it, they use the benzene as drugs. And I haven't seen that in your report, but my question, on any level, have you discussed with this issue? Thank you.
We have analyzed this issue a few years back. I don't remember now the years, maybe 3 years ago or so, where indeed we analyze the drug use among street children. The data are very patchy, so anecdotal information confirm what you just said, that there is use of substances, some more relating to stimulants, and others more relating to, for example, to heroin or other substances. So we're not able globally to estimate how much, but as you say, that is definitely a prevalent phenomenon among school children. And since you mentioned Africa, and that's why I think it's particularly important to think about the years to come, both in terms of, as I discussed earlier, the fact that Africa has the youngest population, and young people are the ones that are more exposed to drug use. And so the increase in population in Africa and the combination with the fact that there is in Africa a very young population, that indeed is a worrying trend for the young people in Africa, not only the street children.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is about the darknet and the use of cryptocurrency to pay there. How important is to regulate the cryptocurrency market just to stop the darknet as a drug bazaar? Because the lack of transparency indeed is a factor to that. And the second one is about methamphetamine. There has been an increase in international interception by the police, but the chemical precursor has fallen, the interception has fallen like 99%. I don't know how can that be possible. And is there any indication that a state actor is involved in any kind of methamphetamine production, like, I don't know, North Korea or something like that? Thank you.
Yes, so for the cryptocurrency, as you know, the cryptocurrency used to trade drugs are a very, very small percentage. The issue of cryptocurrencies is, it involves a large economic market. But definitely for the drugs, that is an instrument that we argue can be used to help control the sales in the darknet. And particularly, because that's one of the things that why the darknet is becoming so more and more popular is anonymity and the fact that is less risky definitely than purchasing on the street. And so the regulation of cryptocurrency can help, together with other issues. I mean, any measure alone would not be enough, but that would help to also increase the capacity of law enforcement to actually infiltrate and also to identify also those behind the darknet market. On the methamphetamine, what is happening is that the control system of drugs include also the control of precursors. And so there are certain precursors, chemicals, that are under international control. What traffickers are doing is to move into other chemicals that are not under international control. So in a way, other chemicals that then they can use to either produce the control precursor or what we call the precursors. So that's why it's becoming more and more challenging for law enforcement to use also precursor control together with the control of the drugs. And basically what we see now that clearly there is an expansion of the methamphetamine market, both in the two big markets, Southeast Asia and North America. And so that's why an increase, a massive increase on seizures, that we can say comfortably that is an increase in the market, because we see also a decrease in price, we see an increase in use, so clearly this is an indication of market expansion. The fact that the seizure of internationally controlled precursors is going down shows that the law enforcement has not the capacity to interject and to use, if you want, as a supply control measures, the interjection of precursor, because of this continuous cat and mouse game that the traffickers are playing.
Well, I have a question on the chat here, Angela. This is from Julia from AFP. The report notes a record again in cocaine manufacturing in 2019. Why is that? Is that fueled by an increase in use due to the growing world population, so demand, or what is the reason for the record again in cocaine manufacturing?
Question. So, the cocaine is one of those markets that is led by both. As the great majority of drug market, you have a combination of supply-driven factors and demand-driven factors. And what we are seeing here is that indeed you see the supply growing, but also at the same time we have seen the increase over the years of the use in the two big markets. In the US now is stabilizing, but in the last few years there's been clearly an increase, and the same for Europe. And so there are both combinations. From the supply side, the increase is mainly led to the more concentration of the cultivation and production site. So even if cultivation is slowly going down, we have seen a decrease in 2019, and now the new data from Colombia again see a decrease on the area under cultivation. But traffickers are concentrating more the production, making the production more efficient. And so the manufacture of cocaine is still increasing. Again, not as fast as it was increasing in previous years, but it's still increasing because of this concentration and because of this increased efficiency factors. On the other side, we see an increase in the use. So both sides. What I think what will be important, again, thinking about the future, is that what we have seen in terms of markets in the past, the two big markets, North America and the Europe, were quite a distinct market. You could see it on the price, you could see it on the purity level of the cocaine, so clearly managed by different groups, and so what we would define different markets. What we are seeing now is that actually the markets are merging. We see now the purity in Europe having equally and having the same level of purity in the United States. But again, that means for Europe, that used to be the one where the price was higher, where the prevalence was lower than in North America. So the tendency and the trend that we see, and that is worry for Europe, is that this trend will bring possibly new users in Europe, and we are seeing it currently still increasing use in some of the main countries. We have also seen emerging the use of crack cocaine, so more harmful use also of cocaine among some of the users. So clearly all indicators are going into the direction that Europe is still expanding market on cocaine.
Okay. Next question from correspondents in the room. Or any follow-up questions? Albert, yes.
Just a short follow-up on the. Thanks. Just a short follow-up on the darknet. You said drug sales in the darknet are only a small percentage, small share of the overall drug market. Can you quantify that or give an idea roughly?
Less than 1%.
Okay.
So.
Any further follow-ups from the floor? Let me update, see if there's anything on the chat again. No, nothing yet. Any further things to add, Angela, in wrap-up?
No, I think there is a wealth of information in the hundreds of pages of the report. And yes. Yeah, that show different drug markets and for different regions. I just wanted to say that compared to previous years, I think we put more efforts this year to think about more the future, so to alert, to use the information that we have to alert about trends that we may see, and so in order to prevent some of these ongoing trends. That in all counts are not positive trends looking in the future. And so I think in the future we are not looking at so far sign. I mean, there are some good news, and I think maybe it's important to highlight also some good news. And we have in terms of MPS, so the new substances that come into the market, that for maybe 5, 6 years ago was the major threat that we had on drugs, because it was so fast, the rate by which these substances were coming into the market, that the worry was that this would have challenged completely the way how drug control could have happened at national level to catch up with all of these continued changes substances. I think what the good news is that the international control system has proven to work. And so now we see a containment on these new substances. So we used to have more than 250 new substances globally coming new into the market, and now we have 71. So still a threat and still an issue to address, but clearly this threat has been contained. Another good news that we have seen is that there has been an increase in the availability of drug treatment medicines like methadone and buprenorphine. And so we have seen that the availability of these substances globally have increased 6 times. And so this really shows how also overall globally there is more science-based treatment for drug use. And so again, that is an encouraging trend to see that treatment is more and more based on science and medical treatment. So yes, I think it's important to highlight also good, positive trends.
No, thank you. Follow up. Yes.
Whether you have any new experience, such like last year's, from any country?
Experience in new countries emerging as a source of
disagreement with the report?
Yeah. No, I would say, the report is based pretty much on information that is provided to us by the member states, plus scientific literature or information from our organization. So we haven't seen any disagreement on, on the major and the fundamental issues that we are presenting in the report.
No.
have a last question about the darknet. It's a follow-up. You said that you are focusing more about the future of the drug market. In the executive summary, there is some paragraph about how this darknet can change the global market. Like there will be a global drug bazaar. How do you think it would look like, such a globalized market?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, one thing that I haven't said is that in the report we don't only look at the darknet, but we also look at the open web. So in general also open. And we see and we analyze also there the role that social media or other online companies have in the drug market. So, and already there we see that the role of the internet has been not much in the open web to sell drugs, controlled drugs. You will not use in the open. You will not see in the open web somebody selling methamphetamine, for example. But what there is the selling of substances that help the synthetic drug market. And so the selling of the pre-precursor that we were discussing earlier, the selling of equipment, the selling. And so this already is making even wider the know-how of drug production. On the darknet and on the user side, what we see is that it can happen what happened with we have in the legal market. Today, we can buy almost everything from every country. And so we have at our disposal accessibility to any kind of commodity, while before, our access was only for the commodity that was sold around us. So for the drugs, so far, and the map that you have seen with a different color shows this, that is geographical confined. So you have, for example, the use of tramadol for non-medical use in Africa, and that is restricted to certain part of Africa because that is the type of market that has established, and so users access what they have in a way available in the market. With the internet is the idea that more drugs will be available to everyone. And so what we could see is that the map that I showed at the beginning will basically have all colors everywhere. And that will, again, challenge, I mean, and already, we've seen it already, that drug use has changed over the last 20 years. Is a lot more polydrug use, a lot more combination of substances, because you have this more availability. And that is the outlook of looking at what will bring the darknet and the use of the internet in the future.
So everyone, if that's the last question, I think that's it. We'll wrap up. I don't see any more questions on the chat. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much all. Stay safe, wear your masks, wash your hands, keep the protocols, keep the distance, have your vaccinations if you want to. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Angela. And now we have some other interviews to do. No, some lots.